Hello everyone, and welcome back to The Wolf Among Us with Yost and Valid. We finally got through this game. This amazing piece of storytelling from the folks at Telltale Games, based on an amazing comic strip, or amazing visual novel. So I don't even know what I'm talking about. Based on the amazing Fables series, which was released. Goodness gracious, Fables was started releasing in 2001-ish, and it went on for I think almost a decade. It was a very popular series, and for good reason. I've read the entire thing, all 150 issues, I think. And then to release this game on top of it all, just expanding all that happens in that series, and then resurrecting the series through the Wolf Among Us comics. Which I think was worked on by some of the original story writers and artists of the Fables comic strips. Excuse me. So what we're going to be doing today is talking more about kind of a review. But before we do that, we are going to go back through the extras and check out the last few entries that we've unlocked in the Book of Fables. Now, as a reminder, this has not been a 100% run, so we're not going to have all of the entries unlocked, unfortunately. But just how it is. And I think that depends entirely on your choices, because we're only missing one from the 5th chapter and 2 from the 3rd. Yeah, so we're only missing 2 from the 3rd chapter, and then every other chapter we're only missing 1. So that entirely depends on your choices, I think. Vivian's story, The Girl with the Ribbon. This is... well, I can just read, because it talks about the fable and the short story in here. Vivian was the very first to bear the curse of the purple ribbon. Removing the ribbon would result in death, and any attempt to talk about it was thwarted by the spell upon it. As time went on, she tried to live a normal life. Eventually, she married a nice man, but he was constantly wondering about the ribbon around her neck, despite her pleas for him to leave it alone. One night, while she was sleeping, he attempted to remove it. As he pulled on the edge of the string, Vivian woke and saw what her husband was doing. In a panic, she pulled away, preventing the ribbon's knot from being undone. Furious, she tried to express the severity of her actions, but her husband was able to understand. She realized then that she couldn't trust him and decided to leave. She lived alone for the rest of her days in the homelands, preferring the safety of isolation to the risk of another betrayal. So with the original story, this is a full-fledged story that Vivian's character is based upon. In the original story, I believe what happens is that there is no actual betrayal, and the woman manages to live out her full life, and in her last moments, she tells her husband what the ribbon is for, but because she spoke about it, the ribbon just undid itself. The ribbon that this character story is based on worked a little differently than it did in this game, but it made it very interesting from what I remember. I haven't read the story for a very long time, but it's amazing because I'm going through this game and I'm remembering all these fairy tales that I never in a million years would have recalled if it wasn't for the different things in this game, like the Crooked Man. It was not until I saw his character that I remembered the Crooked Man. There once lived a crooked man who lived in a crooked house. Something crooked something with a crooked mouse. He had a crooked cane and walked a crooked mile, and something and picked up a crooked sixpence, something. You know, something, just a little rhyme like that. And that came back to me when I saw the Crooked Man's character design. How well can you design a character like this so that people who have read the story can recall this? It's 6 lines. It's 6 lines of nursery rhyme. And I never would have remembered that if it was not for the character design. How incredible is that? That this game and the Fables comics have the power to recall those children's stories, those nursery rhymes, those fairy tales. How crazy is that? And we never would have... You asked me about that, I never would have remembered it. So I just want to commend both Fables and The Wolf Among Us for bringing that to people, that power of memory and recall. The Pudding and Pie, Vivian and Georgie's place. Vivian and Georgie met during the exodus from the homelands, and they helped each other survive the long journey to the mundane world. Upon their arrival, however, they found it hard to make a decent living. I'm sorry, I got all this Christmas food that's like making me burp. With what little money they had, they opened the Pudding and Pie. Operating a strip club may not have been the most desirable occupation, but they figured it was better to be in charge of a place like this than be forced through desperation to work at one. Yeah... That's unfortunate. And the whole irony of how it fell into the hands of the Crooked Man. The Big Bad Wolf. Bigby's true form. Bigby's true form is that of a giant 8-foot-tall wolf, and bigger depending. In addition to his iconic huff and puff power, he has also inherited other abilities from his father, the North Wind. For example, Bigby is able to hold his breath for an abnormally long amount of time, making it impossible for him to drown. And as the wolf, he has insane regenerative capabilities. He is truly the son of the North Wind, which is a lot, especially when you read through the stories of Fables and what the North Wind is all about. Just in fairy tales alone, the North Wind is an incredibly powerful force. And for those of you in the Southern Hemisphere, for you it's probably the South Wind. But in the Northern Hemisphere, the North Wind is iconic for bringing in the cold and the winter and having the power behind it that none of the other winds have. So Bigby is imbued with that. And his design looks awesome, by the way. I love that design. Mary's loyalty, part of the job. Before I get into this, it's probably going to talk about some of it, but if you read the comics, it does a lot more to shed light on Bloody Mary's backstory, and it is incredibly depressing. I almost cried reading it. It was so bad. I mean, it was well told, but it was such a sad story. And it talks about the whole deal with the mirror and all these shards that you see in her. And I'll talk more about that once I finish reading this, because I actually read through the comics once I finished playing this game, and it's Bloody Mary began working for the Crooked Man many centuries ago. He promised her freedom to do as she pleased, as long as she agreed to act as his personal bodyguard and hitman. Because of the Crooked Man's power and influence, Mary never had to worry about getting caught by the authorities. She enjoys her job immensely, and would defend the Crooked Man to the death, mostly because she finds it fun. So the deal with Bloody Mary, this is actually not the original Bloody Mary, and by original I don't mean like original from fable stories or anything like that. She is a mirror version of the original Mary that lived in life. You guys can figure out more about this when you read the comic yourselves, if you want to read the comics yourselves. It's not that long. It takes maybe half an hour to read, to read the whole 30 issues worth of The Wolf Among Us. But in Bloody Mary's case, what originally happened was she was a lonely woman, looked very different. Her hair wasn't jet black and with a red streak or anything like that. Just an average woman from Victorian era, that spent time with a group of friends who was always making fun of her and always talking about getting men. And what happened with Mary was that she found a man in the mirror. There was a man that met her in the mirror and seduced her, and that became her partner, and they eventually married. And what ended up happening was the man in the mirror got her mirror form pregnant. And watching the transformation as her mirror form became more, it's carrying, as her mirror form came to term, you watch the Mary in life become more sickly and desiccated and draining away as her copy in the mirror is needing more of that energy to sustain her. And at the end of it all, the man in the mirror, trigger warning, just letting you guys know, so give yourselves like 30 seconds to cover your ears if you don't want to hear this next part. The man in the mirror performs a C-section, rips out the baby, and what happens to the mirror Mary happens in real life. She ends up in pieces, dead. So I guess trigger warning is kind of over, so that was more like 15 seconds, but whatever. So what Mary does, she ends up dead in real life. Her mirror form is somehow able to live. I don't remember. Oh, right. The mirror form and her real life form, they touched. And she was able to go into the mirror and live. So her real life form died. The mirror form went on. And because of all the trauma that she'd had from her husband who betrayed her, from the women who tormented her psychologically, she basically died inside. And she went to the man in the mirror world and found out that the only reason that he wanted her to have a baby was because he wanted to get out of the mirror world. And the mirror baby, the living baby of glass, was the payment that he required. And he was doing this to so many women. It was heart-wrenching to see. The only consolation that I have is that I think he ended up dead somehow. I don't remember. I don't remember exactly how that went, but it was a very, very disturbing story. And all these shards of glass that she has inside her body, those are remnants of her baby child that she threw on the ground and shattered. Because if she can't have her child, no one can. Quote. And and that series of events turned her into the monster that we know and ironically love, today. So yeah, and the women that tormented her ended up dead by her own hand, and of course authorities can't figure out, so they blame her for Jack the Ripper in the stories. Anyway, moving on to less depressing things. Fabletown Justice. When a criminal is captured in Fabletown, the traditional procedure is to hold a formal hearing in front of the community or concerned parties. However, exceptions are often made to expedite the process. In reality, there aren't any hard and fast rules for these types of situations, and the extent to which policies are upheld can depend on who is being charged. Like the Crooked Man. A New Order, with Snow White in charge. With Crane out of the picture, Mayor Cole has officially appointed Snow White as the Director of Operations and Deputy Mayor in his absence. Many would say this promotion is a long time coming, since she was instrumental in the establishment of Fabletown and personally ensured that many fables made it to the New World safely. She's also been doing the work of Deputy Mayor unofficially for years, considering Crane's absence and the idiocy. Sheriff Bigby. After fleeing the homelands, Bigby Wolf spent many years wandering through Europe. With a fabled colony quickly developing in the New World, Snow White and Feathertop tracked down the wolf and offered him passage to Fabletown. He agreed, and Snow cut him with a lycanthropy-stained knife to give him the power to change into human form at will. Not entirely true. I believe the knife actually forced him into a human form. And then once she removed it, they began to be able to work with him being able to go in and out of wolf and human form at will. Bigby became sheriff of Fabletown under King Cole's administration, but because of his violent past, many fables didn't trust him, and he was banned from ever setting foot on the farm. To this day, he struggles to redeem himself in the eyes of the community. And he has a much harder time doing that in the comic than than I did in this game. I was showing a very nice side of Bigby Wolf that you don't see in the comics, because he is still very much a savage. Not a savage, I shouldn't say that, but he very much retains his wild side, and the way he expresses that scares a lot of people. He's still very gruff, he's still very strong, he still carries that air of immense power and unpredictability with him, which I didn't have going through this game. I didn't show that off so much. I was a bit more reticent to bring out the tough hands, as it were. So that is it. That is The Wolf Among Us, with everything that we've seen. And from what I hear, there is a second Wolf Among Us in the works. There is a sequel to this game, a Season 2, that will be coming out at some point in the future. and we'll just have to wait and see what happens. I'm really curious what happened with the woodsman, because he just kind of disappeared at the end of the 4th episode, I think. Near the end. Because we said goodbye to him, and then he walked off, and then we went to see the Crooked Man. That was pretty much it. We didn't have any closure on what happened to him. So I'm curious to see if he's going to show up in the 2nd season or not, and if we ever get to visit the farm. Which is an unlikely occurrence, considering that Bigby is banned from the farm, and unless we play as another character, we are very unlikely to ever set foot in the farm as Bigby, unless we do some sort of stalking thing. Oh, I forgot about Mr. Toad's animation. Fucking slumlord. Now, there's a lot of controversy regarding what goes on with Faith, and let's see if I can find her. She's gonna be a ways around here. Not Holly, not Grendel, not you. Where is she? I'm looking for Nerissa specifically, because here we are. No. Nerissa. Here we are. Because Nerissa and Faith share the exact same line. And what people wonder is if there's somebody else walking around in their skins. More or less. If somebody is orchestrating something far beyond the scope of what we were seeing with the Crooked Man. And just remember how much the world opened up to us when we started pursuing Faith's head and the whole mystery behind that. Like, what happened in that whole event? What was the driving force behind that? And we came upon this whole web that the Crooked Man had woven within the town, within Fabletown. But what's going on with Nerissa? Who is she really? And is there someone pulling the strings? Is it someone in Nerissa's body, or is it someone that is merely pulling at her strings, making her say things that she doesn't even realize? And that's something that they touch on in Fables. There is a battle between two incredibly powerful witches, and they touch on just the intricacy of charms and spells that each of them have woven. And you would have to read the comic for yourself. I don't want to spoil anything. But it talks about the intricacy of just a world-spanning web of different enchantments. And tracking down why Nerissa said exactly what Faith said, which is part of the reason why I chased her at the end of this game. And I'm curious to see what that choice is going to bring should the 2nd season ever come out. But anyway, this game was amazing. The only complaint is that the responses are timed. And while that in of itself is not necessarily a bad thing, because it does force you to make in-the-moment decisions and respond how you would more naturally react, at least that's the theory. The problem with it is, especially as a Let's Player, you don't have time to really talk about your decisions because you're always having dialogue. And what's really annoying is that the times change. The time that you have to respond changes very drastically. There have been many times where a response, I was given a response time of around 5-10 seconds or so. You know, not a huge chunk of time, but enough to allow me to think. But there were several instances where I would have that 5-second or 10-second response time, and then I'd have a statement where I had a choice to respond in less than 2 seconds, and I could not react fast enough to pick the choice that I wanted, because I'd think it through and then I'd realize how little time I had left, and before I could move my mouse to click, I was already out of time. And that robbed me of a few very important not important responses, but I felt cheated. I felt cheated out of responses that I would have enjoyed having. And I think the same goes for pretty much anything, because one of the things I like to do is I like to listen out to dialogue. I like to draw out all the dialogue I can, as you've seen. And it comes with some very interesting results. Like, if we had picked a punishment for the Crooked Man, we never would have seen, at least I don't think we would have, we never would have seen him wrap his handcuffs around our neck. And we wouldn't have had that whole scenario where we had justification for throwing him down the well. And it turns out, this is another spoiler alert, unless you've seen one of the alternate endings of The Wolf Among Us or have read the comic strip, the comic series. So once again, if you don't like spoiler alert, if you don't like spoilers, then cover your ears for the next 30 seconds. But what ends up happening is, in the comic, they incarcerate the Crooked Man. They lock him in a cell and do the whole magic thing. And then the Crooked Man pulls out a mirror. And his escape is through the mirror, and they realize far too late what he had in his back pocket. He had an escape plan. He had one last trick up his sleeve to get out, and he pulled it off. He managed to get through the mirror into the mirror world, and he escaped. And that was the end of the comic series. And we didn't have that whole ordeal. And we will likely never have to deal with that ordeal because of the fact that we threw the Crooked Man down the wishing well. Okay, and the spoiler stuff is over. So yeah, we will not be dealing with the Crooked Man unless he somehow managed to escape even the wishing well. Which, according to what happened in Fables, you just simply can't do. It's impossible. So the Crooked Man is gone, with no recourse. So we will not have to deal with him in the next season if that ever comes out. But anyway, having dialogue like that, where it's timed and it's constantly changing like that, that was my one big criticism of this game, was the time that you have for responding. And it helps with tension in a lot of scenarios, but to me it was just annoying. And that's one reason why this is the only Telltale game that I've played, because of those limited response time windows. And they are very prevalent in The Walking Dead and any Telltale game, really. I think the one exception might be Sam & Max. That was the first series Telltale ever did, was Sam & Max, which is another very amusing comic series, which I haven't read, unfortunately. I just know it's supposed to be funny as hell. But it's a mechanic. It's a Telltale staple that drives me nuts. And that's mostly the reason why I haven't played Telltale games, aside from the fact that they are very emotional and tend to come with very depressing material. More so in The Walking Dead than in The Wolf Among Us. But it still heavily on the storytelling, and there's a lot of emotion that comes with that, a lot of raw emotion. And disturbing stuff, which I'm not... I used to be really into that when I was younger. Hannibal Lecter is still one of my favorite psychological thriller characters. I still have the movie Silence of the Lambs, and it's probably still one of my favorite movies, but I don't watch it that often anymore because I'm not interested in that kind of subject material. And yeah, it's my tastes have changed. So anyway, aside from that one key point though, this game is amazing. The storytelling is wonderful. The animations, they feel very comical. Not in the funny sense, just the whole willow shading, the whole design is meant to feel like a comic. And they pull it off so well while still giving the characters and the world so much life. And the writers for this game, the animators, all of them do such a good job at building the world and making this an immersive experience that I'm tempted to play again, just to see what the last few entries in the Book of Fables is, and see what other responses for characters would be like. This game was that good. And I think part of that is because there's enough mystery and enough loose ends based on the choices that I made that I want to give it a second playthrough. And that would be one of my criticisms for Life is Strange, is that the original game, not the second one, because of the they haven't come out with the second one yet. I'm talking about the original Life is Strange, not Before the Storm. With the original Life is Strange, you could reverse time and go back through dialogue options to hear different things, hear different parts of a story. You still had major choices in the game where you couldn't go back, and it would permanently affect the outcome of the story. But with how the game went, it was constantly feeling bigger and bigger, and it eventually built to a crescendo and a climax where everything that you did felt like it didn't matter. Nothing mattered except for that one final decision. You don't have that in this game. In this game, the entire sequence is based on choices that you make in a world that is so far beyond your comprehension. And it stays that way. So there's a bunch of little intricacies that you can still explore that you didn't get the chance to do before. And you don't have that in Life is Strange. You don't have one big choice to overrule them all. You don't have that series of different choices resulting in different outcomes. You don't have that in Life is Strange. And you don't have that one big pinnacle of a choice to overrule everything else that you've done, to overshadow everything else that you've done in this game, in Wolf Among Us. And that's something that I absolutely love about this game. So anyway, enough comparisons between two story games. I would highly recommend this game for anybody. I mean, I think I've played it slowly enough that, or put the videos out slowly enough that people can forget things and watch at their leisure or play at their leisure. And I mean, there's so many choices that you have for dialogue and all of that. And one of the things that I know about these games is that a lot of times dialogue will simply have slightly different responses from characters. But it's still interesting to hear what characters have to say, and interesting to see how they react to different things. And there are many instances where I could have talked to someone or said nothing, and that would have prompted a completely different response than if I punched them in the face. But it's almost cathartic to do that, to have the chance to to have had the chance to slap Crane for being a dipshit, that felt so damn good. And I would do it again. To quote Georgie Porgy. And I'm interested to see what would have happened in the Crooked Man's place if we had not let Dumb live. If we had killed him, what would it have been like in the Crooked Man's place? Because we spared everyone until the final time. We had the choice to kill one of the Tweedle twins. I imagine if we had played our cards right, we could have potentially killed the Jersey Devil. I don't know, but it was a possibility. The possibility was there. But we didn't. So what would the outcome have been if we had done that? If we had thinned out the Crooked Man's numbers? He probably would have been a lot less forgiving when we first met. But anyway, this has been an amazing series to play through. I hope you guys enjoyed it at least half as much as I've enjoyed playing it. And yeah, I think this is finally going to draw to a close. So once again, thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. In the next Let's Play, whatever that may be. So until then, have a wonderful day, and take care. Bye for now.